like my grandma going, "Is this thing on yet?"
Gonna
We'll
be
find
like
out.
that.
Yeah. Hello
I'm
world.
peeking.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. Anyways, hey guys. So let's go ahead and start our intro. This is Chat GTM episode 18. We're here today with Mr. Christopher McFadden of the McFadden Group. Christopher, thanks for coming and visiting us today. Very
Mr. Beck,
excited
thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it, Mr. Horn. Awesome.
Great to have you here, Christopher.
all day.
This is great.
Yeah. So let's just kind of start with origin stories. I love origin stories, and it feels like an organic way to get going on this.
Cool.
This is our first podcast coming back from the NRA, I think.
Yes,
Yeah, it is. So
pretty sure.
we've been on a little bit of a hiatus. We haven't done anything in about two weeks and some change. And candidly, we've been pouring through a lot of stuff that we came back from that show with. So we literally have a
Totally.
hopper full of good stuff going on.
No,
And
it's,
we
it's
want to make sure that we're still able to continually start connecting with people that have relevant news and in the industry and are mover and shaker. And I would argue you both move and shake. So, um,
God bless.
so with that being said, Christopher, I think I met you outside of a restaurant that everybody was mobbing into. It was one of those late night, let's go have dinner where there's a reservation for 11 and 15 to 20 people show up, right?
There was a few, man. There was a
Yeah,
few. It was a funny moment for sure to watch. And it was like, because in my mind, I'm like, I know what's going through those souls in the restaurant that are
yeah,
operating and going, we don't have enough chairs. We don't, what are we doing? Why is there so many? They confirmed
right.
at 12.
Yeah, and I think it was the first time I hung out with Monty Silva, and I
Good
think,
man.
dude, I spent 7 hours with him that day. Like I've never hung out with somebody. Let's hang out all day. Okay. Just a really cool guy.
It was
Um,
neat to I love that whole experience down there, and it was my first time introducing McFadden Group over the border, and it was a powerful place to do it as a guest speaker at the show. And my number one highlight was that everybody I met, everybody said, "Tell me more about your business, so I can see how mine can help you."
ooh,
Everybody, it was a standard,
Hmm.
and I haven't seen that as organically, naturally for people just to go, hey, let's sit down for a few minutes. Like Monty and I were in the speakers area hanging out one morning. And he goes, okay, I'll be back in 5. When I come back, tell me about your business and how I can help you. And I was like, okay, let's go. But every single person I met, the same tone and the same gesture came out. I was so
Christopher, is
it
that
was just
before they learned what you do? Because I could think of like as people learn about what you do, they're gonna want to help, right? I mean, a lot of people would be able to relate to what you do
well,
personally, but
yeah,
this is just before that.
that it was before that, and people knew
Okay.
like what my company did, right? But it was
Okay.
more of this. Now we're in person. Let's
mhm.
not fluff around it. The handshake.
Hmm.
Let's have a chat. Let's talk about where we can be beneficial to each other. And it was neat because I had thought I had one of the most powerful moments in kind of my existence of doing now my own business in the last 3 years was talking to David Hopkins, who was the president of the 15 Group, who is the most powerful hospitality consulting company up here in Canada.
Wow.
Does a lot of work in the U.S. as well. Uh, but Jim Taylor, me, and Jenny Companion, the VP of the 15 Group, 3 years ago at the Restaurants Canada show, we were guest speakers on the same panel. And it was neat because David was sitting there watching us, and I was like, this is like, how does he feel being first to the table with other people now opening up businesses? And his biggest thing was that this is about complementing each other to go after the same industry we're all trying to do something for. And it's not about competition. And I was like, that's just the wholesomeness of that right out of the gates as my company was only a few months old, where I took that genuinely to heart in that it was this now seeing it at events that I was at in new areas that I was at. I'd never been to Vegas before.
Oh, really?
So there was a whole bunch of like wow that was happening all at once, and that was the wow moment, was how much attention people wanted to give you in 30 seconds of what can how can this work for us to be able to help each other grow. And I was
So,
love that.
so do you think that was because you were at a hospitality show? Was it more concentrated? Were you were at the Rising Tides get together too, right? The folks
It
from
was.
Whisk and
Yeah,
Sean Walchif and those guys put together, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So I'd argue that group of people is actually anomalously helpful, anomalously helpful. They're an anomaly. There you go. They're so helpful as a group that they get together just to help each other, right? And you found a cluster of these people to do that. Do you think that was the attribution, or that's just the industry? Like, because you're around pizza and bar at that time, right?
It was happening at like I saw it very much there. It
Wow.
was very real there. And meeting Jennifer Dodd and the chat that her
Uh,
I got into about
Jennifer is
my
amazing. Shout out also.
like she was in this wow moment of like everything that I do with emotional intelligence and people discovering better insides to be more effective outside.
Hmm.
Um, and we had this powerful chit chat, and we've never met each other, and we just got into this enlightening conversation. But it wasn't just in this pocket of a bunch of us in the same space. It
Yeah.
was everybody at the show. When it was a handshake, it was tell me what you do, right? What it was always about this interest in people learning more about everybody else and not having to share so much about themselves on their own accord, but it was the curiosity of who's at this show and why are you here? And it was a very neat thing to watch. I
So,
was wowed by it. I was wowed by that show.
so I think
Absolutely
you
wowed.
tee something up really nicely. What do you do? Right. So for us, we were familiar, right? But let's talk to the audience for a second and take them through what the McFadden Group is, what you do, Chris or Christopher, for your clients and the companies and people you work with.
So it's been really neat. So this all started, I had spent 25 years in restaurants. I started when I was 18 years old as a host at Eastside Mario's, which is a big family Italian style restaurant company in Canada. And yeah, I loved it. I became a sommelier. I was on my way to becoming a sommelier by the time I started studying when I was 20, living in Lake Louise, Alberta, working for Fairmont Hotels, which was just purchased by Canadian Pacific Hotels. And I fell in love with wine at 20, and I left acting school, theater school in New York I was in a summer program, which I left, and I came back home. And when there was an ad out to the Chateau Lake Louise, I ended up in Lake Louise, Alberta, super small, remote community, skiing 7 days a week and running,
That's a
as a
rough
waiter.
life.
It was awful,
Yeah.
and and it was amazing. But I was opening up big bottles of wine when I was a kid, I was young, but I fell in love with it. So I knew that I was going to say no to traditional university and traditional college, and that I was going to go after becoming a sommelier. That was what my career was going to be. I was going to go build wine programs and introduce guests to experiences of food and wine, and this was the journey I was going to do. And just before I was 24, I got my diploma, and by the time I was 25, I had one of the bigger wine lists in Canada. That was given to me, but I had to learn how to run the restaurant first before somebody goes, "Hey, here's a 900 bottle wine list to go
Yeah.
and play with."
Yeah.
And it was a shift, but I fell in love with it. And I knew this was the industry. I think hospitality as a whole, not just the hospitality of food and beverage, but the act of people taking care of each other and looking after one another and the service of the gesture of what we provide in hospitality. I can have you over to my house and be incredibly hospitable and not feed you a thing. So why isn't that hospitality? Why isn't the gesture of the captain of a private airline or captain of a a commercial airline that's getting somebody from point A to point B safely? What is not hospitable about that? So I had this whole kind of eye-opening moment in the last few years on what I wanted to do really with myself, and but it took a lot of inside stuff going wrong that I fix and
Boy, don't you know
restaurant.
that one, right? That's a great catalyst.
Oh man, I was like,
Yeah.
this isn't good. I used to just bury things down,
Hmm.
and then everything came up at once, and I was like, oh, I got to take this all on at once. This is not good. And it was a great friend of mine, Edwin Kumar, who hey, we had reconnected after years of just being in the restaurant industry and colleagues, and
Yeah.
we decided to take on the conversation of soft skills and emotional intelligence in the restaurant space and created a program called Restaurant Leadership 101 in 2022, which very oddly enough today I realized as I was having a conversation with a client yesterday and asking her, are you doing it for you or are you doing it for them? And she goes, what? And I said, did you do this company for yourself first or did you do it for others? And now that I look at it, is that I had to do a lot of self repair from battling a lot of deep things. And as I created Restaurant Leadership 101, and I didn't even know AI was a thing back then. So this was a 10-month study of emotional intelligence and
Hmm.
educating myself in it while we created this program. And as I was doing that, I was becoming a better version of myself. And as we launched that program, I had dealt with a lot of family heartache. So my wife and I lived out in Western Canada for 18 years total. And we moved back to Burlington, Ontario, which is half an hour west of Toronto or 40 minutes north of Burlington or Buffalo. We had to come to take care of family things. And my mom was in long-term care with dementia. My stepmom was passing away of cancer. Grandma had Alzheimer's. My wife's family on the East Coast is getting older, and things are starting to show up.
Yeah.
And in the midst of a 2-week moment of being here for my stepmom's passing, sadly, I took what Restaurant Leadership 101 was as a 16-hour program. And Edwin goes, you should do this as one-to-one coaching for leadership teams that need very specific things. And the McFadden Group, as my banner is above me, that's the original banner for the McFadden Group. And it was great, but there was a bunch of us going into this leadership coaching space and leadership consultant space. And I had some good clients and some independent, first to the table, and those that have been in the industry for a long time that just needed a little bit of molding, if you will. And then last summer, I completely reintroduced my company as career coaching with a focus on emotional intelligence and core values alignment. Because I realized if we just looked at leadership as a position for the people that were at the top of the pole, and what about those that are just walking into this business, trying to get to know it? And if we're not paying attention to them as well, then it doesn't make any sense just to keep working on the ones that are going to retire one day and not having any new ones that can evolve into being that next positional leadership that we have. So I believe in actionable leadership, and I believe that everybody on the team can have a better position because they feel more not just responsible but accountable. That was my pivot. So, and that shift made a difference because I'm the first to the table with doing emotional intelligence and relationship and behavioral understanding of why people are stuck where they are or don't know where they're going to go tomorrow because they didn't look at yesterday as a launch point for why today could be better, and today can be the launch point on why tomorrow has more hope and success. And so yeah, my entire premise is that I had somebody yesterday, a client, that she goes, but you're an emotional intelligence coach. And I said, I get that. I said, that's my why. I said, but what would I be doing that for? And I said, you're not in hospitality. I said, you have your own business and you're trying to figure out what's going wrong with the gap in it and the misunderstanding that you have with the brand as its own thing, but you're the brand. So let's fix the brand here to fix the brand out there. And in the middle of the conversation, she goes, I know I need to put that aside. And she said it without even knowing she said it. And she goes, and I was like, got it. There's our first step of what we're going to start working on, is that we're going to push that to the side now because that's the thing that's breaking you. Let's go through this. So after 2 sessions, this reaction was like, got it, right? And the power, I think, that exists in us as just people needs to be paid much more attention to as everyone from a bottom-up perspective rather than just a top-down perspective. So
well,
I believe
there's so many questions that come out of this.
Awesome. So
Chad,
yeah,
I want to prompt you up on this one because Christopher, what you might not know is that the way I position our company a lot of times is I'm the insane person.
God bless. I like this.
And
this is good.
and Chad is I've also packaged him up as he's the one in the mix with the high EQ that diffuses all of my rampant energy, and I know how powerful that is when you have to have that. There, I mean, I'll say it out loud. I think I'm a smart guy, maybe, right? And some people might argue I'm a smart guy, but without the emotional intelligence, you can be a genius and burn down everything. Absolutely massive, right?
Absolutely.
So Chad, how's this make you feel when he's talking about here? And it feels like to me, I
Yeah.
just see this Zen Chad on a hill, unflappable, and you get this stuff. And to me, this is all like kind of revelations. Like you can't always lead with fire, passion, and intensity. You have to temper that. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on what he's doing.
Well, first my first reaction, and like you have a lot of questions, Michael. My first thoughts were like that part of what makes you good at what you do, I've heard, is that you went through it yourself, right? And so that those experiences ultimately made you better at helping others. And I was like, oh, I relate to that. I grew up with a kind of screwed up family, people fighting everywhere. My first job in the industry, which I call, my first job in the industry, is actually as a conflict mediator between like people who are fighting and angry. And it's like, Okay, so whether it's causal or correlated, I mean, I've been through these things that either had to use my emotional intelligence or develop it. And so that's the first thing I connect with you on as you're sharing. And I also want to highlight that until recently, I feel like a lot of people didn't even understand these terms. And I'm going to ask you, how well do people even understand the term emotional intelligence? Because I feel like for years, this was the subject of clickbait, right? What is the number one trait that is predictive of career success? Ooh, gotta click. I gotta know what that is, and variations on that. And inevitably, it would be emotional intelligence. So I want to ask you, Christopher. My first question to you is: do people have a mature understanding of what that even is?
I think there's been more awareness of it, of hospitality. Let's just talk about the hotel and tourism and restaurant and bar folks out there and nightclubs. Is that it was always just the grind. It was doing the gig, but nobody paying attention to the person doing the gig. It was the position of the gig itself. And it was neat because when we launched Restaurant Leadership 101,
Hey guys, I'm gonna
um,
interrupt real quick. There's this constant
oh,
clicking I keep hearing. Is there a
oh,
fan or
sorry,
a
yeah, it's my
dog
dad's
eating
dog.
something or
My
something?
dad's dog trying to get it back.
All
Bonnie,
right.
come here. Come
I'm
here.
like, what
Come
is
here.
that
Come
noise?
here. Come here.
And while you're taking care of that, Christopher, I'm going to say to our potentially live
Do we
audience,
have anybody on?
if you're there, thank you for being here. We
Yeah,
don't know
there's
how
nobody
to
there.
engage with you. I don't know how to see it,
Yeah.
or so just we're novices at this, so apologies.
Yeah, so this is an experimental run for those attend. I saw
My
somebody pop up for
apologies.
1 second on YouTube. There it was one person. We had one.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Good. Hey, we're
yeah, I was
back.
just trying
All
to
right.
figure out that noise. But I'm proud of myself for knowing it was a dog.
That's my dad's dog. Yeah, we're boarding my dad's dog while he's over
Yeah.
in Italy right now.
It just sounds like he was
She
over on the microphone going.
she was at my glass back door, just clawing at it. Say, "Oh, no!"
Love it. All right,
Yeah, yeah.
so let's
Um,
let's get back on
what's funny
track.
is
Though,
that
sorry about that.
it was an interesting sell because nobody had ever heard about this being a thing in restaurants. Like it was, can we? Let's talk about the soft things versus just the hard things and the technical stuff.
Hmm.
And I've used this in reference to how important a cover letter is to a resume. Is that your cover letter is your soft skills. Tell me a little bit about you. Right? Your resume is your hard skills. These are the
Yeah.
things that you did. So I used to turn resumes over and push them to the side
Hmm.
because it, like, oh, you don't want to talk about that? And I was like, that's the thing that got you this, right? This is the component of what we're doing, right? Does this make sense for you? Hopefully it makes sense for us, but most importantly, does it make sense for you to, do we fit you, who you are?
Right.
And people were kind of stunned by this in the conversations was that I think it was a lot to introduce the idea of it. And when we did it strongly. And now, sorry, one second. I'm live. Can you just grab me?
I'll mark
Good.
that.
Love it.
Yes. But the whole world of it today now is that we're talking about it more. My dad created emotional intelligence programs for the police force that he was with in Ontario. He did it for the provincial courts of Ontario. Oddly enough, I'm following that kind of suit, but I'm not really realizing I did it.
Yeah.
And I think now it's just much more about is that happier staff sell more things. So if your staff shows up and we've paid more attention to the fact of, hey, how's your day? Are you okay today? And I used to always say this, and I had a client recently. She goes, I never bring my outside problems in. I was like, sure you did. Human. The difference in walking into a business and everybody knows that we all do it because it's just simplicity of life.
Yeah.
Changes the tone of how we take care of our team and how our team helps take care of us.
And take care
Is
of
that
guests.
this is
Right.
right? Is that we got to take care of guests, right? But if your team's not happy doing it and not in the right place to do it, well, that's a problem. So pay more attention to your team to start, because if you're constantly replacing your team, if you're constantly in this position where nobody feels like they're, you don't have to be cared for. This isn't a family. We all use the references to the family, but it's a team.
Right.
Right? I was using this. I got into this whole deep thought this morning about a comparison to restaurants and baseball teams. And I've been stuck on this thought today of going, who's the most important person on the baseball team? And some people say the pitcher. I'm like, okay, well, in the moment, right? But if it gets to third, well, the third baseman's not the most important person. And if the first baseman misses, well, okay, then how does the second baseman fill in to catch that person up? And I know people have said this whole coaching thing when it comes to like, coach your team, right? And I believe in that. Is that I think we're doing better as a whole in our industry by taking care of everybody and not just the dollars that are coming in, right? You have to have that to work your business. It's just simple math. However, happy people sell more things. So a team shows up because they want to and not because they have to. It changes the entire dynamics of what you do in a business. And I think if we're just taking care of guests as the people, we lose sight of the wholeness of taking care of people overall. Be hospitable to your staff to be hospitable to your guests.
Hmm.
And I think it shifts perspective when you put more of that care on yourself so that you can be strong for your team, right? And then everybody can be stronger for the guests.
So I don't know if I caught the actual definition. So as defined in a business, just in business terms in general, like how would you define emotional intelligence, right? Because when immediately my brain pops off to, well, Gordon Ramsay's yelling at his staff in the back of house. Is that emotionally intelligent because it evokes a response and maybe that drama is what drives them harder? And is that an emotionally intelligent act, or is the soft spoken one equally emotionally intelligent or showing a better quality? How do you equate or measure emotional intelligence in the workplace there? Because I can see some fiery people that do get really good results and they do passionately care about their people. So where is that
Absolutely.
balance? And how do you look
I
at
think
that?
about, you know what? I think it was funny when I started really diving into studying emotional intelligence, and understanding the 5 layers of it was self-awareness into self-regulation into empathy into motivation and into social skills. And I think a
Regulation.
big thing that
Okay.
happens as the regulated is a hard place to sit. Is that you can be aware of yourself and then be empathetic for yourself. And I think we forget about that part too. Is that the empathy has to start with you. Is that you can't just be empathetic and put yourself. I said this the other day. I was like, you can't put yourself into somebody else's shoes before you put yourself into your own shoes. And I said, and I think most people have this gap in really understanding and regulating their emotions to equate for more success down. And I think that whole initial understanding is, are you intelligent with what's going on inside you? Are you aware of what's happening? Versus just again, this is more that reactionary
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
response, right? And I think I had somebody recently tell me that we're all emotionally intelligent. I was like, that would be impossible. We all have the opportunity to be, and it was a pretty big deal. I took it personally because I was like, it's
Did
not
you have him
true.
defend that statement?
I couldn't because it was, well, you know what? I'll just say it. It was my professor. I'm studying
I thought you were
psychology.
gonna say it was your mom,
It's
but
called
okay,
University.
professor.
And it was and I was a professor for the last 2 years. My wife goes, "You have the same job as her, but right
Right.
now you're her student." And she wrote on my first discussion was, "We're all emotionally intelligent." And at 3 a.m. I woke up. My wife goes, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I'm bothered by that comment." Right? We all have the opportunity to develop our emotional intelligence and to become emotionally intelligent, but it takes work. If we were all just emotionally intelligent, then life would just look simple. We
I
just have
have
to
to
put.
ask about that, Christopher. So, if before this conversation, I would have said emotional intelligence, oh, that's one of the kind of intelligences you can be born with. You can have spatial awareness intelligence, you can have linguistic intelligence, you can have that IQ intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence for moving around,
Ooh.
and you have emotional intelligence. And everybody's going to have it to some degree. It's on a spectrum. Hearing you talk, I would say, oh, is emotional intelligence a practice? Is it a skill? Is it some combination of those more than this innate thing? What do you think?
So here's my question. Can I ask a question? Do you think leadership's innate or behavioral?
Both?
I
I
would
agree with
agree.
that.
I would agree. You can
Yeah.
take a Australian Shepherd that's never herded cows and drop them in a field, and they'll herd instinctively without touching. And there's people that are like that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Where I think emotional intelligence, yeah, it's within you, but we're not all emotionally intelligent. And I think that was the key to it was that the premise was not we all have it, it was we all are.
Oh,
And that's where I got my feathers ruffled.
Yeah.
Professor, if you're
Yeah.
watching this. But it was where I got ruffled by it. Where I was like, it's like leadership. I believe leadership sits within everybody. Some of us find it, some of us don't. Some of us just don't get it, and some of us absolutely highlight within it. But I think it's something, sure, but it was the more of the change. One word in that changed everything. It's like I used the word angry or disappointed in the same sentence to see the difference of how people's position changes.
Hmm.
Angry, people's chests get out and they get proud and they get defensive. And then you use disappointed and people sink. And I'm like, look at that. All I did was change a word.
Hmm.
I asked a client the other day a question. I said, what excites you when it comes to thinking about work?
Right.
And they were lost. And a week later, I said, same sentence, take the word workout and put life. And they just went off on everything. And I was like, great, now we answered the first question. And they started answering it. I was like, see how all we did was flip a word. And I think there's a change that happens in people is that we all have the potential to be everything. But I think when you start, I think the emotional part's hard because our thoughts and our emotions are connected. And they can be triggers back and forth. And I think the work that goes into it, and I say this wholeheartedly because it was 2.5 years of solid work of studying and learning so that I could do it for me first. And now I'm in a comfortable position that I'm happy to help pay it forward and have people see a little bit more of themselves because I have a little bit more of an initiative how to do it. But everything that I do with clients is stuff that I did for myself and had to work on.
Yeah, I wonder in that blanket statement, a sociopath could even be qualified to be emotionally intelligent, or some version of a person who has no emotional regulation. Period, is identified as being bereft of that. Like
Yeah.
they just couldn't qualify. Like there's people who just don't have it, right? Or some people were born low IQ. Not everybody's high IQ. So, do you think people are born low EQ and might not even have the capacity to be coached to that?
No, because I was really proud. I taught leadership, ethics, and diversity at college for 2 years and helped build the program itself. And I really, my first assignment of the semester was drop the class into two groups. And I was like, you go and study innate traits that
Hmm.
create leadership. And you guys create behavioral. Go and do the study on behavioral. You got an hour, figure it out as a group, and then we're going to go to a table and we're going to go to a debate on it. And I want to see if there's actually a debate within it. And as I saw that, and I was teaching personal wellness in a college as well, which was a great elective for these hospitality students,
Hmm.
is that being using AI on fully personal wellness assignments. And I was like, you're not well. Like, what? You're cheating on yourself. And they're like, and I said, the difference in how I always loved watching people have steps in their growth and take it personally. So I really wrote assignments to be not just the thought of, I created helped create a program called Tourism and Hospitality Innovation. And the whole thing was really based upon, what's happening in innovation itself within our space. And I said, but if I don't start the program with everything that's great with technology and AI and how far in advance we've become and how much COVID really pushed this forward, into if you're not innovating yourself and growing as an individual, then it doesn't make sense if we just keep worrying about the technology factors that are out there if you're not watching your own growth happen. So by the third part of the semester, I turned the innovation into full self-discovery papers because I said, before I send you out into the wilderness and do your co-op programs as postgraduate students, I said, you need to know more that's here to be more successful out there. So why wouldn't that be considered innovation as well? And they were like, oh. So I gave them personal SWOT analysis to do. I was like, okay, what are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? I do this with clients.
Ooh, I
And
like
they
that. I've
said,
never heard of a
look, you
personal
see
SWOT.
it. And they were like, and I said, this is where you have to find some humble pie, right? This is, who are you? Who do you know as you? And with my clients, it's a great starting point because then we start breaking into core values exploration, into a deep study on core values and find which ones that they didn't realize they really had, and then connecting them back to where they started with the SWOT analysis to where they got to. And I did this in leadership school, is that who are you as a leader today? And 14 weeks from after everything we've taught you, who do you think you are as a leader after 14 weeks? And we're not looking for, like, it's not like your life has changed. However, do you see yourself a little bit differently 14 weeks later after everything that we've learned? Because we made it not just educational, but personal. And I think that's more of the component of why I just adore watching people go from here and have a plan to get to here and take those steps that they are, rather than just the necessity of trying to convince somebody that they have to move up just one step. Is that I love watching people have a growth plan. And I think them understanding more of their why in their what changes everything. So I think, yeah, emotional intelligence, yeah, we can all have it, but it takes some work. And I think even if you walk out of the gates going, I'm emotionally intelligent, it's like great, great, great.
So you made me think of something when you guys were talking about SWOT, because businesses business terms, and businesses will also think in terms of ROI. And so I'm curious, because we talk at tech companies and the ROI of a solution, but for you, dealing with emotional intelligence and personal development, if you were talking to a company who's thinking about emotional intelligence coaching for their team, and they want to ask you about ROI, is that a conversation you enjoy engaging in, or is the whole notion of ROI on something this important offensive in some way?
No, I love it. Absolutely
Okay.
love it. I ran restaurants for 20 years. Well, I learned how to be in restaurants for 5. But it was 25 years I spent in restaurants. And everything there has to be money at the end of the day. There has to be. And one position that we had done differently through COVID when we reopened is none of us knew what we were doing. And I said this on a spot a couple of weeks ago where I went, the mentality of we have to get people back in the doors. Everybody wants to go out. Everybody wants to have fun, but so do we.
Hmm.
And if we don't walk home at the end of the day or walk into our business feeling safe, then it doesn't make any sense for us to be able to enjoy anything out there as people want to enjoy when they walk into our doors. So I said our staff comes first. Period. I I have no interest in how people feel about COVID. I don't ever belittle people because you don't believe. Like, it doesn't matter, right? We all have our personal views on it. But in restaurants in British Columbia, we were put second to the table from first responders for getting vaccinated. My staff was the first full restaurant team in all of British Columbia that was fully vaccinated. We didn't let people walk in the door without a mask on. As much as our provincial doctor said you don't have to show proof, I'm like, we feel differently. We've got a strong enough partnership team that we're confident in what we're doing because these are our 4 walls. And if our staff feel unsafe about things, then the whole business model doesn't work. We can have as many guests as we want, but if our staff can't show up because they're sick, don't want to show up because they're tired of just being pushed around, our ROI is not going to make any sense. So in September of that year, when we first budgeted the year before COVID was even a conversation,
Yeah.
we budgeted with 143 seats in the restaurant, 5,800 guests in September, 230,000 in sales, something around there. And we shifted perspectives. We had 64 seats in the restaurant, and we ended up doing 1,000 more covers than we budgeted for, with 60% less seats and 100,000 more in revenue. Because when our team showed up, we had a lineup at the door that people wanted to dine where they knew they were safe because they knew our staff was there, and they weren't getting used to new staff showing up, and we have to keep replacing people because people are sick and they got COVID, blah, 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 blah. But through all that, I forgot to take care of myself first. So I kept just positioning it as I should have been number one, making sure I was okay. Right. But I just buried things down. And I was like, okay, I'll get over that. Right. Other people mean more right now because they just do. But my staff were number one. And we saw the return on investment completely differently because we positioned our thinking differently. Have the same team, keep the same team, keep the same guests, get new guests that are understanding what you're doing. I had new people showing up that were just, I used to steal Gordon Ramsay's line of, watch Kitchen Nightmares. And he always says, hey, nice to see you, whether or not he's met the person or not. So I started doing that in the restaurant. People were like, have we met? I was like, no, but we started a conversation now. And they're like, that's kind of cool. But you can see people's hamster running on it, right? So when we had resumes just flooding in because the difference was we know how you take care of your team. And
Well,
we never closed our
as
doors.
a onophile and a psalm, I've been playing with this. Not me, meaning you. You probably appreciate this. For years, I've always played with the term cultural terroir,
Aha.
right? Right, that
I
the
know.
culture, much like in viniculture, dictates the sweetness of the grape, that imparts the flavor, makes it enjoyable. And so, if the
Absolutely.
cultural terroir is off, then the product isn't going to be as sweet, right?
That's exactly it. Right? So it was a shift of how we're going to do this. But I believe, yeah, like I love numbers. I love running books. I love building. It's funny. I have no idea how my iPhone operates. You want to build your POS system and your inventory program and turn everything digitally, not a problem, right? But my phone's not vibrating right now, and I'm just miffed that I can't figure out why, that I've just given up on it.
I called it the gift.
I'm just like, you know what, that's okay, right? But we used to have like our Squirrel POS system was connected to our Microsoft in the back, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden at 7 o'clock on a Saturday, it decides it has to do an update, and I was like, oh goodness, all right, hey chef, just to let you know, 200 left to come in. I'm gonna do verbal orders and handwritten orders now, and verbal pickups, and
Oh,
let's
jeez.
watch madness unfold, right? But we did it because we took care of the people that were responsible for doing it. We made it an accountability to each other. And I think we all see better. I saw better returns. And I hope other people do too. Is
Yeah.
that, again, my whole thing was happy people sell more things. And if we're putting more numbers in the bank and able to control our costs because they're making more sense, because more revenue is being driven by a team that's showing up and not abusing the hours, not slagging or not taking a break when all of a sudden you're like, who's taking care of your section, right? Is that the drive is different. People show up loving to sell things for somebody that loves to have them there to sell things. And I think, yeah, I love numbers, and I'm a really good numbers guy. And I love watching results come from thinking not just by staring at the books and wonder how we're going to crunch this, right? But shifting perspective on it. And I think it starts with your team, 100%. After,
So
of
I have
course.
one last big question to riff on before we hop off. We're getting close to time. But thinking about this, like these are deep subjects, and it's not something you get on the phone, you call and go, "Hey, you guys need a hot cup of EQ or what's going on over there? Or you guys screwed up and need to talk?" Or but my question is when you see people come to you for this, or the ones that open up vulnerably and say, "Hey, I think I need help with this," or "Could you come in and coach us?" What does it typically look like, and how do people decide to want to reach out to you, or when do they hit that "I need this help" moment?
I just became a part of our chamber of commerce in my city, which was just a cool. I was like, okay, this is neat. Like I've never been a part of a
Right,
chamber of.
right.
Yeah. Jay Ashton was like, you should get a part of your chamber, and I was like, okay, right. So I got my cool little chamber plaque here on my
They would
desk,
have you
and
do 90 things, but okay, I'm listening.
absolutely, absolutely, right. And it was neat because I gained a client instantly on my first conversation with somebody going, oh, you're a career counselor. And I said, no, counselors push you, coaches pull you.
Hmm.
And she goes, what? And I said, it's just a different perspective. Is that I'm there to lay out cards for people just to see a little bit more. So when I'm doing team coaching, as
Hmm.
much as I do individual coaching, is that I've always believed that every piece of your puzzle has to connect to the whole. And if we're just paying attention to positional places rather than the people within those positions, it's hire the
Yep.
people, not the position. The position's the easy thing to teach. But when I'm doing things is that everybody has their piece of the equation. So everybody will have a certain part of an activity to do or exercise to do within the sessions that this is your piece to the puzzle that we're putting together. And I do this very much still individually when individuals come. I had a girl reach out to me on LinkedIn last week who goes, I've been following you for 2 years. I knew I would use your services one time. And I said, where are you located? She's like, I'm in South Korea. I was like, well, cool. All right. So you're 10 hours ahead. What's this going to look like for your 6 hour program with me? But the conversation shifted when people go, oh, and I said, if your team right now, right? And I said, this is a big, honest thing you have to say as an owner. Is your team at the very best? Well, yeah, people have been there for a bit. Okay, well, what's the longest time a staff member's been there? Well, we've had somebody for about a year and a half now. Okay. I worked at a steakhouse company that I had waiters retire after 50 years.
Hmm.
So the change of conversation starts with very much, what can you do that I don't? And I said, I don't over blemish what I know. The difference is that I, when I became educated and licensed to talk about this stuff, because I wanted to learn more about why I was going to do it for you and not just come to the table saying, hey, I learned this on AI, blah, 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 blah. But, and nothing wrong with that. I'm not knocking that at all. But I went and studied, and the certifications on my wall behind me were reflective of me going to have to learn more before I wanted to go into this space. So when the owner turns into, okay, great, let's have a sit down and a conversation, right? It's a simple metrics of, Where are you at? Where were you yesterday? Where are you today? And where do you want to be tomorrow? And how is your team integral within those decisions that you make? And do
Hey,
you know what Stacy does versus what Helen does and versus what Tom does and why they have to bring just as much to the table as you do as the owner, as the executive chef does, or the GM? Everybody has to have their part in understanding why they're important to the success of what you're doing.
I'm going to jump in because we actually had a question from the audience, which I didn't
Yeah.
expect. This
What?
is from Miss Allie Haskell of CBS North Star, hat wearer, storyteller, nerd, and relationship genius. That I'm just reading her byline. I didn't say relationship genius, but still our friend Allie. But her question was, Chris, what's the one piece of career advice you find yourself giving over and over, regardless of industry or experience level? Great
Ah,
question, Allie.
that's an awesome question. I really like to start with people very simply trying to understand why they're doing what they do. Like when you wake up in the morning and you head to work, right? Are you going to work for others or are you going to work for yourself? Not having necessarily your own business, but I had a client the other day, awesome girl, and she just went through this. I have to go to work. It's like, why? And she goes, what? And I was like, well, you have to pay for your roof and put some food on the table, right? Like we have to do these things. That's work. We have to do that. That's how we
Right.
survive. Uh, but but what if when you woke up in the morning, you shifted your perspective on, I get to go to work today.
Hmm.
That's a cool thing. Not a lot of people have that. So the absolute pivot point in the reality is that you were to show up, and it was neat because this girl ended up getting a promotion 2 weeks after I set that mindset for her. Was want to go for you, and it creates a better have to go for everybody, all feeling like they have to be there. But it shifts the tone with perspectives of people watching the happy person walk in the room
Yeah.
because they want to. So that's the big drive, is that go and want to do something rather than go and have to do something.
I like that.
And it
And
takes
I
work.
there's a
Like this
certain
isn't
I like the
easy.
fact you layered in gratitude that you
Right?
have a job. One, you should be kind of happy about that,
Yeah.
right?
Like the world fell apart over years ago. Like some didn't make it and some did.
Yeah.
Some left and some are coming back. And but I think the perspective shifts lately is that the gratitude and graciousness that you have for what's in front of you immediately, and is your ball bouncing straight, because other balls are going to jump into the line of fire, right? And get rid of the balls that don't work anymore. Drop them, right? So when we go through core values, of the 60 core values, whatever's not very important, forget about them.
Hmm.
Don't worry about those, right? Because those are your hiccups and your speed bumps that you have and what we're trying to pull out of you that you never discovered.
Hmm.
All simply because I decided to ask you questions nobody expected that you would ever be asked. And the perspective shifts and somebody goes, huh. And I'm like, great, great, right? But it's pulling out this want to show up
Hmm.
rather than have to show up. And it just takes a little bit of conversation.
Christopher, I want to ask you this. It's more just for fun, but I think people will enjoy this question. I hope. What are some ways that Canadians are generally more emotionally intelligent than Americans? And then the reverse. What are some ways that Americans are more generally emotionally intelligent than Canadians?
They say they're sorry a lot. Sorry, I had to.
This is we do. We apologize for like I it's so funny in my home city. If four people pull up to a stops four-way stop, right? You're all fighting for who's going to get the first right away, right? Because everybody each other in. You flick your high beams at somebody. There's two things that are happening. They know their lights are either off or their high beams are on. And my wife's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Watch this. This is great. It's energetic. It's enthusiastic." I'll tell you a story that I was a little shocked by a response. So we were on a cruise a few years ago. My dad, my brother, or my dad, my wife, and I, and we were sitting at the in the all anytime dining, and we got sat with this couple, and we all started just chit chatting about what we do for livings. And the couple that we met, she was a defense attorney in Washington, D.C. My dad is a retired cop of 25 years and then rewrote the provincial court's legislation on how people were going to be trained. And it was just a little chuckle about her being a defense attorney and my dad being a cop for all those years. And then it got to my wife's cookie business, and then it got to me. And I said, I work with people developing their emotional intelligence to align their core values to figure out where they should be going in their careers. And she goes, "What's emotional intelligence?" And I said, "Pardon?" I said, "Can I just ask where you went to university?" And she says, "Yeah, I went to Yale." And I was like, "Pretty solid. So you have your law degree from Yale. Did did emotional intelligence never come up in conversation anywhere in that, especially the fact that you're a defense attorney?" And she goes, "I have no idea what it is." And my dad, who's now built these programs on emotional intelligence for police here and for courts here, we got into this incredible
You'd think they'll
conversation
play
about
in
it.
jury selections and stuff like that, like trying to peg
And
each
I was
person's.
shocked,
Yeah.
shocked. And he was a lawyer for the FDA. And I was like, okay, like these are seriously educated people. Why not? And I have no interest in thought by any means on saying Americans here and Canadians here, is that this is people, right? And the magic of just all of us being here today is the simplicity of, I think, the opportunity, all of us becoming more emotionally intelligent, based upon us becoming more intelligent, more emotionally intelligent for ourselves. And it's like the whole thing is that social skills is the last step to it. All right, let's get you back into nature now, right? And it's like the constant conversation of, how do you motivate people? I'm like, you can't motivate somebody that's not motivated. Motivation's an internal state, right? So I believe just simplicity. This has nothing to do with where we live and who we are. It's that we all have opportunities just to be better us's for ourselves first and better for the people around us. And I think we can inspire each other to just achieve greater things because we pay a little bit more attention at the steps rather than the leaps. So I
I,
applaud
I
Americans and
think that
Canadians across the board.
you took us to a great. You perfectly like landed the plane right there. Um,
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, I think the just quick snapshot. And Chad, I'd love to hear yours. Before we hop off here. Is to me it feels like the output of this done right is kindness. You have more patience for other people, and Chad can attest that I could have more patience with myself and be nicer to myself. One of the things that we've been working through together, working with together, as we're doing this business together, is I live this out in the open to help people with it too. Is I'm ADHD, and part of ADHD is emotional
So am I.
dysregulation, right?
So am
Emotional.
I.
We are really
It's
mean
the
to
other day.
ourselves. We're usually nicer to others, but we're really mean to ourselves, right? We also get very fiery when it's wrong, but we don't usually take it. I don't take it out on other people. I just yell at a moment, right? And so Chad has been
Yeah.
working through this, and I think as I'm listening to him, a lot of stuff what comes out of his mouth is maybe just be a little nicer to yourself. It's a translation of what I hear him saying is like, hey, can you, or even nicer to people, give them an extra moment to think about what they're doing. It's not overt. Like we had a conversation yesterday that it was a revelation, and it was a very small thing, right? And he goes, and we were talking about something where somebody had dropped the ball, right? And my assumption that the ball dropping was deliberate, and I go, this is malicious. This is intentional, right? And Chad goes, well, there's this thing called, and it's not Occam's razor. It's what razor is it? Harold's or
I'm looking, just verifying Hanlon's.
Hanlon's razor,
Hanlon's,
right?
Hanlon's
And do you
razor.
know what Hanlon? So Occam's razor is the likely, the most obvious answer is the right answer,
Yes.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Right. Hanlon's razor. Please define it, Chad, because I thought this was awesome.
I'm going to read it. Never
Yeah.
attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity or incompetence.
Right.
Ha.
Like so I go right to they're out to get me when it might be they just didn't know and they're clueless and they're just dropping balls.
I appreciate that, man.
Right.
I decided last year in September to go and get tested officially for ADHD,
Yeah.
where I was like, I'm very tenacious and I get things done, but I started watching myself have numerous tabs open because I went, oh, I can jump into this and start this, and especially as a professor, I
Yeah.
was assignments galore grading, and then all of a sudden I was like, I have to get checked out for this. So I showed up in my doctor's office and she goes, what does your morning look like before you got here? I was like, let me tell you. I couldn't finish. I need validity in my day. I need to start and an end to something. And
Yeah.
I said, and I couldn't finish all of these papers for 37 students, but I knew I could crush these 17 students over here. And she goes, if I was to ask you to go and get milk at the store, what would that look like? Do you know where your keys are? And I was like, yeah. She goes, always? I was like, no, but I know where they would be in
I have
another
air tags
moment.
on everything.
Right? And she goes, but would you just go to the store and get milk? And I was like, no, I'd probably drop cash in the bank and then I'd go across the street and get whatever I need over there. And then I'd get to the store, I'd have 6 things in my buggy, and I'd text my wife and go, why am I at the grocery store? She
Yeah.
needs milk. And I was like, she was eating something to dip your cookies in. And I was like, okay, got it. She goes, what do you have? I was like, Pogos, I got mustard for them. There's some pickles, right? But I'll go and grab the milk.
Got Kurt full
So yeah,
ADHD
I
is
got
what
a
you
little
got.
bit of I got
Yeah.
a little bit of help with that, which is good. But yeah, I think we all have it. But we always used to just blame our life in restaurants. I probably have ADHD or OCD.
Yeah.
Apparently,
Well,
I
I
did.
also I think that lump is almost the same as everybody has EQ. There's a different version or variety or
Different
drastic of
version,
that. Yeah.
Right?
Well, hey,
So yeah,
let's park it there because I think we could
yeah,
have a whole other conversation about
totally
the
different.
neuro spicy life, and a neurotypical in the room would be a really interesting moderator for this. Um,
Woohoo.
yeah, I like this. Well, guys,
Mr.
let's
Beck.
wind it down for now. We have some other things we have to get to today, but Chris, this has been a revelation. I thought we were just gonna kind of get on and do one of those things like, hey, I met a guy, let's give him a voice, and this is so much more than I thought it would be. Like you
Thanks,
have
man.
so much depth going on there, and there's not enough runway to get to the good stuff yet. Like this is surface. This was, hey, let me tell you a bunch of stuff, but I think we could hone in on any of the things you started topics on as its own conversation. And I'd
Thanks.
like to invite you back when the time's right to jam again.
I
Yeah,
appreciate that, man. This
yeah.
is rad. Yeah, you guys are rad. I was excited about this. I'm like, I loved our moment. Again, I think moments are everything in this world. And in a parking lot, I was like, I know you. You're like, I know you. Here we are. So,
Love it, love it.
super
So
rad.
last question: if people want to get to you, right, what's the best way for them to connect? Seek you out. I'm sure there's an email. I'm sure there's a website. I'm sure there's a LinkedIn. But where's your favorite? Where are your favorite watering holes to be contacted at? And how's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's great. I always use my personal account, Christopher McFadden,
Okay,
to build me as the brand of the McFadden Group. So Christopher McFadden on LinkedIn. My website is tmg-hospitality.ca. And to connect with me, an email is christopher@tmg-hospitality.com.
fantastic.
But I'm out there and you can find me.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown, as they say in Peanuts.
All right.
Appreciate you,
Thanks, buddy.
Christopher. Chad, any parting thoughts before you hop off?
Um,
Always put him on the spot.
Yeah.
no, I am looking at the clock,
Yeah,
and
we have to
hey,
hop off.
it's like, and because we're live, we can't make up an excuse with why
No.
we're late on the
Yeah,
next one,
he
right?
knows right now that we're talking about
This
him.
is this has been great, Christopher.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chad, thank you very much. And Michael, such a pleasure.
All day.
All right.
Right back at you. Chat GTM episode 18. That's a wrap. We'll see you next time, guys. Thank you for your time, attention, and being part of our community. We will see you next time.
Well done.
Till soon. Ciao.
And we're out.